Welcome to Next Week Last Night. I am your host, Stuart Johnson. Thank you so much for joining me today. Boy, do we have a great show in store for you. My guest tonight, crippling loneliness. Well, she's not really a guest. She's been living with me for these past couple of years, but she's agreed to join me tonight. So that's nice. Of course, on top of that, we'll be taking a look at mint chocolate chip ice cream. I personally think it tastes like Jolly Green Giant ejaculate, but some people seem to have a strange and unusual obsession with it. Tonight, 3 expert diabetics join me to weigh in on the discussion. However, before we get into all that, of course, a look at last week's news. America, across the nation, still reeling from the tragic death of George Floyd at the hands of Minnesota police officers. Good news comes in the form of the fact that all officers involved have been arrested and charged. The main officer, the one who put his knee and held it on George Floyd's throat for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, has been charged with second-degree murder. Meanwhile, the other officers have been charged with aiding and abetting. Of course, this is only a small step towards the road of long-term recovery needed in order to ensure that events like this do not happen again. Of course, right-wing media is still trying to portray this as racial arson in an attempt to divide the American people as white versus black, which is funny because I remember when Ferguson, Missouri happened, that same right-wing media was very happy to blame then-President Barack Obama for the deaths, or for the death of the young black man involved, and the subsequent police riots, saying that he was inciting racial conflict and adding fuel to the fire. Well, if Barack Obama was adding fuel to the fire, this motherfucker's pouring it in by the gallon. But that's not our main story tonight. Our main story tonight actually concerns a different piece of news that came out last week that hasn't been talked about quite as much in the midst of all the riots and mayhem and general state of anarchy across the nation. And that news is Donald Trump's announcement that the United States of America will be leaving the World Health Organization. Now, this is significant for more reasons than I can care to count, to be honest with you. I mean, for one, as of this day, as of the moment when I'm filming this, the World Health Organization counts 195 member nations, meaning if the U.S. were to leave, it would pretty much become the only recognized sovereign state on Earth not to be a member of the organization. But this is nothing new. This is a trend that America has been following for decades now, in terms of a overzealous and overeager militaristic policy supplemented with a complete lack of desire for peaceful cooperation with other countries. And so, with that being said, tonight I wanted us to take a look at America's history of foreign policy. Now, I know what you're thinking. Stuart, we got a lot of our own issues right now. I mean, the very fabric of our great nation is being torn at from within. Is now really the time to be looking at foreign policy and what we've been doing everywhere else? I mean, shouldn't we focus on ourselves for right now? Well, I'm so glad you asked that question because that's exactly the point. For too long, America's foreign policy has led to it neglecting stateside domestic issues, which have allowed an oppressive system to be built in the shadow of said foreign policy, and also a buildup of discontent and oppression to occur, culminating, of course, in the subsequent riots that have occurred in various cities across the nation. You see, foreign and domestic policy are not two separate boxes. They are two sides of the same coin, and they bleed into each other a lot more than you might think. Which is why I think it'll be interesting to take a look at exactly how America's foreign policy has contributed to a complete and total collapse of interior domestic society. So let's begin then. And we begin our story with war, because of course we do. America's history of foreign policy is a history of war. America has been at war with a foreign country on and off for the last 130 years. whether it be Spain or Germany or Japan or Germany for the rematch, Korea, Vietnam, Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq twice, Serbia, and now just this year we nearly had a war with Iran. How is it, though, that America has been able to pursue such a, let's call it militaristic bingo policy, going from place to place to place to place, participating in various conflicts without any sort of real resistance from within? Well, a lot of this has to do with the fundamental lack of understanding of what war is and what it looks like on the side of the American people. Now, I'm not talking, of course, about servicemen who actually join the military and see war firsthand. I'm talking about everyday civilians who live their lives and never really know what war looks like. Let's face it, the last time a war was actually fought on American soil was back in 1865. The last time a foreign country tried to invade was 1812. It's perfectly normal and understandable that because of this lack of close proximity to warfare, that it's this fantastical, inconceivable concept to a lot of American civilians. Bottom line is, Americans don't understand the realities of war. And I'm not talking about war as it's portrayed in Dunkirk or 1917 or even Saving Private Ryan. I'm talking about living continuously in a city that has no power and no running water, and where tobacco is worth more than gold, and walking through the streets and seeing bullet holes in the sides of buildings, and tank shells going off in the middle of the night. These are realities that American citizens just aren't familiar with. Take the war in the Middle East, for example. America has been involved in the region since the 1980s with Afghanistan. And in the decades that have followed, many American citizens have been born, raised, gone to college, gotten jobs, gotten married, had kids, and never once have they been affected by what their country is doing somewhere else. That's not normal. And that is what has allowed a system like this to take shape. When you take a government that acts like a high school boyfriend willing to stick his business in anything that moves, and you combine it with a population that is completely disinterested in the topic at hand, you get 21st century American imperialism. All right, I'm only kind of exaggerating. But the reality of what I'm saying is real. And it's not just America's addiction to foreign conflict, it's also her aversion to peaceful multinational cooperation. America treats treaties and peace agreements the way a 25-year-old guy treats commitment in a relationship. It's something you don't talk about. Unless the other person brings it up, in which case you come down with a sudden and severe case of I'm leaving you itis. Of course, America will work with other countries. I mean, we do it all the time when it's time to bomb people. I've heard the word coalition thrown around so many times, it's actually a joke at this point. And it's funny because whenever the question gets asked as to why America is so hesitant to cooperate with other nations, the word that gets brought up more than any other is sovereignty. We don't want to lose our sovereignty on this issue, and we don't know the direct or indirect consequences that a treaty like this could have. But think about it. How can you say that you're scared of direct or indirect consequences of a peace treaty, but not be concerned by the direct or indirect consequences of waging a war? It doesn't make logical sense. Those are two contradicting attitudes. And it's been going on for a really long time. This isn't just Donald Trump. Bill Clinton was so desperate to bomb Serbia in the 1990s that he circumvented the wishes and orders of UN Secretary General Kofi Annan and did it anyway. Bush invaded Iraq over weapons of mass destruction that just did not exist. Barack Obama tried to rein himself in and at least acknowledged the fact that he does have, or did at the time, have a little too much fire in his power, but even he couldn't make lasting, meaningful change. That's okay, though, because our current president's only real interest in foreign policy is when he's having sex with Estonian hookers, who, by the way, are probably the third most underrated hookers on the market. I mean, they're not Ukrainians or Hungarians. Speaking of which, have you seen those Ukrainian real agent videos? I mean, those things are amazing. I mean, breathe. It'll go away. What were we talking about again? Oh, right. Foreign policy. My point is, since coming into office, Donald Trump has left more multinational organizations than I even knew America was in. Whether it be leaving the WHO, as I just mentioned, leaving the Paris Treaty or the Paris Accords, leaving the nuclear arms deal with Russia, leaving the nuclear arms deal with Iran, stifling relations with the UN, leaving UNICEF. I mean, the list goes on and on. And this guy pulls out so much, I'm surprised Ivanka Trump was ever even born. For more information on the topic, we turn to our foreign relations correspondent, senior correspondent, Vladimir Vasiliyevski. Take it away, Vladimir.
Thank you, Comrade Ivanovich. This is Vladimir here, reporting from Chechen underground bunker. You see, I am a big fan of Donald Trump, for he is a great leader who ensure to strengthen Russian superiority in Eastern Hemisphere by exposing American government as capitalist pigs. He has ridiculed the country on international level. This, in return, has allowed us to cement our position as true European leaders, and in turn, bring us one step closer to ultimate goal of Civil War Part 2. So for this, I would like to say thank you, President Veliki Trump. May your reign be long and prosperous.
Thank you, Vladimir. And he makes an excellent point. America's foreign policy, especially since Donald Trump, has been to make friends with enemies and turn away our closest allies. I mean, since Trump became president, we've been buddying up with the likes of North Korea, Saudi Arabia, Russia, and China, and turning away the likes of Canada and the European Union. And it's not just multinational organizations that we refuse to join, which I could maybe sort of understand, but we won't even cooperate on individual treaties. I mean, take the Law of the Sea Treaty, for example. Ratified by, well, to put it roughly, Earth minus USA. Apparently the reason for this is because America, to quote Senator Inhofe here, to sign this treaty would be to relinquish our sovereignty over 70% of the world. Well, here's the thing, Mr. Inhofe. America has not, does not, and will never owned the oceans. I mean, shit like that just makes you sound like the 16th century Spanish Armada. I mean, I don't even know how you come up with something like that. And the thing is, when you're already viewed as an imperialistic force, and then you go and elect a guy who represents the worst stereotypes that your nation has, pompous, arrogant, rich boy dumbass, it really doesn't help with your global PR. By the way, speaking of American imperialism, that brings us to the sponsor of today's episode. This episode of Next Week Last Night is brought to you by Taco Bell. Taco Bell, insulting both Mexican culture and the human digestive system since 1964. Let's look at some other treaties then. How about the UN Treaty for the Rights of the Disabled. What did the good United States Congress have to say on that? Oh, well, we don't want to lose our sovereignty on the issue. Yeah, because who wants some one world Illuminati helicopter flying in here telling us which ramps need to go in front of which library? And of course, then after that there is, and this one is honestly hard to believe, the UN Treaty for the Rights of Children, ratified by every nation on Earth except for the United States of America and Somalia. Wait, hold on a minute. I'm just getting news. Okay, I've just received word that Somalia has in fact ratified the treaty. So it's just us then. You know, I'm all for breaking rank and standing up for what you believe in. But there are certain occasions where conformity is okay, you know? It's okay to do what everyone else is doing, especially when it comes to the rights of children. And that's the thing, this song and dance that we've been doing with the international community for, I don't know, let's call it a century and a half, it can only go on for so long. I mean, at some point, people will just cease to put up with this bullshit. And it's happening already. European correspondents I've spoken to have told me, I quote, you know what, I'm kind of glad all this shit is happening to them, because they have been starting messes all over the globe and turning people against each other, so it's nice to watch them wallow in their own shit for a change. And honestly, as much as I wish I could disagree, it's a valid point. When you spend decades bullying people, at some point you can't be surprised when those people don't really want to help you. And that's the thing. America does need help. Or will need it in the future. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but a time will come when this nation will need allies. And I don't know that anyone's really willing to take our side at the minute. Especially with an absolute clown in charge who has brought America's foreign reputation lower than maybe it's ever been. And all of this brings us back to the start of our discussion. The riots in Minneapolis and the rest of the United States as a whole. We try and tell people that we don't have money for criminal justice reform, that we don't have money for infrastructure, that we don't have money for universal health care. And yet we spend more on our military than the next 26 countries combined, 25 of whom are allies. This tradition of manifest destiny or whatever you want to call it, it's got to stop. I mean, this isn't just dated, it's dumb. This is not what a modern 21st century country looks like. We really need to start asking ourselves, what can we do through diplomatic channels and peaceful cooperation to make the world a better place? And by doing so, make America a better place. I'm not saying there aren't some times and some occasions when military force is the only option. At the end of the day, I don't think anyone was going to talk Adolf Hitler out of killing 6 million Jews. But a lot of recent conflicts have been entirely avoidable if we just tried a little harder. And that's what we need to start doing. And maybe once we've fixed the way we treat others, that will allow us to reflect upon and change the way we treat ourselves in our own country. Treat others the way you want to be treated. That one book said, I can't remember what it's called. On a closing note, my thoughts still go out to all of those affected by events that have transpired in the last few days. Huge respect to all of you who are participating and doing what you can to try and push through change. But this is a serious issue, and it's not one that we can allow to get lost in the weekly rumor mill. We can't allow America to be viewed as a bully anymore. If we want to be seen as the beacon of hope and civilization that we claim to be, it's time to start acting like it. Thank you all for joining me for this episode. If you enjoyed, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. We have new episodes coming out every single week. I've been your host, Stuart Johnson. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll see you all next week. Good night.
Šta? Kako misliš? Russian not allowed in Chechen bunker. We are all Slavic brothers, bleh. No, come on. There is no need for this violence. We are all friends. One day, we will all be united under true Slavic rule. No, wait. Ay, suka!